Our scripture this morning comes from John's Gospel, the 20th chapter. John's account of the visit to the empty tomb on Easter Sunday differs from the accounts in the Synoptics in several ways. The Synoptics say that various women, including Mary Magdalene, went to finish preparing Jesus' body. Because they had had to bury him so hurriedly on Friday, they did not have a chance to do the full rituals that Judaism required. But John mentions only Mary Magdalene, although when she reports to the disciples at first, she says, "We do not know what has happened to the body." Her presence alone at the tomb gave rise to stories about her special relationship to Jesus. Some early Christians even called her an apostle, in part because of what she says at the end of this passage. Another difference in John's gospel is the reference to the grave clothes. All four Gospels say the body was wrapped in a linen shroud for burial, but John is the only one to mention the grave garments on Sunday morning. And John mentions not just a shroud, but a separate cloth which was laid over Jesus' face or wrapped around his head. These grave clothes have excited a lot of interest among Christians. About a dozen churches in Europe claim to have the shroud in which Jesus was buried. These shrouds all have an image of Jesus' body on them, and all of them are obvious fakes. You can see the brush strokes where the paint was put on, except for the Shroud of Turin, which still puzzles scientists who've examined it. Results of various tests of the shroud's age and how the image was put on it have proved inconclusive. There's also a story of a woman, Veronica, who wiped Jesus' face as he was on his way to be crucified, and she found that the cloth held his image, the image of his face. The story, which is number 6 on the Stations of the Cross, is a complete fabrication of the early Middle Ages with no biblical foundation whatsoever. Christians have been intrigued by the idea of the shroud because we don't know what Jesus looked like. If his image was left on the shroud or on some other cloth, wouldn't that be wonderful? But John's Gospel says nothing about an image on the cloth, just that the grave clothes were still there. This suggests to John that the body was not stolen, but that it disappeared, dematerialized in some unknown way, leaving the shroud as it was where it was placed around the body. We can't draw any definite conclusions about what happened in the tomb, and that's probably best. This is a place and a time for faith. John's version of the story gives us a vivid sense of the confusion and the excitement of that first Easter morning. And we will read it now from your bulletin or from your Pew Bible. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started to the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. This is the word of the Lord.